me see if it went live or not. There we go. Looks like it did. No, maybe not. Yeah, there we go. We went live. Let me see if I can hear myself. Not sure if it's coming through. Check. If anyone's in chat, please confirm if you can hear me. This on, right? Okay. There we go. All right, muting myself so I can have the chat open. Let's see if we got our announcements going out. Looks like it did. All right. Oh, I should open YouTube as well to follow that chat. 1 second, everyone. Oh, no, that shows. Okay. Just Dojo. Let me open YouTube. All right. All right, so now I've got both chats open. I'll try my best to follow those. This is my first time streaming since they've started streaming on both Twitch and YouTube. A few years ago, streamed occasionally on the Dojo Twitch for a few small things with the other students of the dojo as well. Mitch Fabian, for those who don't know me, I used to be very active in the dojo a few years ago. Joined the dojo back in, I want to say late 2018, maybe early 2019. Before the training program existed, was very active in the Discord. Eventually had to kind of move on to professional aspirations after my family grew with my 2 daughters. So for about the last 2-3 years, I haven't really played any chess, but came back to chess about 4 months ago, after I moved to Canada, and have a bit more time on my hands. And so rejoined the dojo. Jesse is currently playing in the senior championship in St. Louis, and so he's unable to stream the graduates, and so I am going to be streaming graduates, and then we're going to look at Jesse's game after we get through the graduates. So I will try to keep up with chat, flipping back and forth currently, but my apologies if I don't see it right away. Great. So let's get into the graduates. So this week it looks like we have 8 graduates that will be looking at the games of and congratulating them on their graduation. So preliminarily, let's just start off and say congratulations to all 8 of you graduates. It's a really great thing to see people graduating and putting in the time to graduate and move up in their dojo cohort. So keep up the good work. Starting off, we've got Damon T91. It looks like Damon has about a 1400 Lee chess rating, 700 chess.com rating. It looks like they have not been really tracking too much recently. They did some tactics work on Monday, played a classical game yesterday, so great job. Keep up the classical work, and then graduated today. So congratulations. Let's see if that classical game is annotated here. It looks like date played was last year, so that was not their classical game from yesterday. So Damon, if you're watching, highly suggest that you annotate that classical game that you played yesterday. Looks like it only lasted for 10 minutes though, so Not sure how classical of a classical game it might have been. It might have been a really quick one, but still good to look at it. Especially if you lost it within 10 minutes, it means that you need to be spending some more time and looking at those all the possibilities a bit more. So yeah, I would highly suggest tracking more of your progress and annotating and playing more classical games. But congratulations on your graduation up to the 600 to 700 cohort, and keep up the good work. All right, back to, since they didn't have a recent classical game, we'll look at Kai. So Kai says, "This was fun. I've now really stuck with the dojo for a good few weeks. Sometimes it was a bit harder to fit in the time wise than others, but I did actually make progress. I noticed that tactics and blunders are what I have to keep working on again and again and again." Yes, Kai, tactics, especially at the lower cohorts, is 100% of the reason why any games are won or lost. Those blunder checking, etc. So Kai is on Lichess around 1500 and around 800 on chess.com, and doing some good work tracking now since pretty much the start of June. Looks like is when Kai started tracking with the dojo. Maybe joined the dojo before that, but it wasn't really with the program up until now. So for a month and a half now, has been tracking dojo work, looking like a lot of games primarily, which is really good, and working on tactics and endgame. So great job, Kai, and let's look at your game, your most recent game. Looks like it was played a little less than a week ago. Let's look at that. We've got, looks like Kai was black here. Make sure there's no chats. Okay. A game I thought I'd lost, and one where I should have sat on my hands. The mistakes made were very avoidable. Right, so Kai's playing e45, king pawn opening, and we get to a scotch. So knight g5, very unusual. Typically, if we're going to go for any sort of gambit line in the scotch, it's going to be bishop to c4. This is known as the Scotch gambit. The usual Scotch gambit. And so knight g5 is not the usual way that this pawn is gambited. It's either bishop c4 or taking back the pawn is the other prevalent line. So let's see how Kai approached this, and see what happened here. So we do get now to somewhat of a transposition where they're attacking the weak f6 pawn or f7 pawn. So we have to do something to stop this. It looks like the most relevant idea would be d5. Potentially, there also maybe knight to e5, where we're forking the bishop and the protection. Like, it's not really a fork, but let's see. If we go here, is there anything white can do that's odd? Yeah, I mean, I guess if you take with the queen, if we take the bishop, then the queen and the knight are targeting down on the f7 square. So we kind of lose a pawn that way. So yeah, so I think that's why we can't go with here because of this. So okay, but that's an important thing, Kai, to note, is kind of why you moved the thing you did and why you didn't look at other things is always important to think of. But as we saw, d5 was the main move. It looks like it's the correct one. E takes d5, b5, bishop takes. Now we're protecting and attacking the bishop. c4. Okay. Ooh, and then we're taking and allowing this very bad tactic here. So this now is a massive, massive advantage for white. We are down 2 pieces, right? Yeah, a rook and a knight. So d takes c3, correctly identified as a blunder, reflexively took en passant. Yeah, and this is why you don't have to take everything that we see. So d takes c3, big, massive blunder. Game should be completely lost, but at lower rating levels, games aren't always over. And as we see, black wins at the end. So it's a good thing that you didn't resign. But yeah, definitely. You've got 30 minutes and you spent 10 seconds on a massive, massive blunder. So definitely something to think about. Always spend the time that you have and at least calculate before making anything, especially like a queen trade when the queen's protecting a piece. Looks like we have a chat. We've got Elio Yellow. My apologies if I've mispronounced that. I've always disliked this opening line as black. Objectively, I believe it's quite bad for white. After knight e5, without proper prep, black can easily get into trouble. Yeah, a lot of the e4, e5 lines can be really hard without prep. Scotch and Scotch Gambit can be very difficult to play. At the 700, 800 band, it's not very common to study openings, but it is good to know, at least as you've played your games, think of the mistakes you've made and white has made and reflect on that. So now we know, some ideas here. But yeah, as you go up in the ranks, you need to know at least a little bit of opening theory, maybe, 6 to 10 moves, where you at least know the basic ideas. But yeah, it can be pretty dangerous. I used to play the Scotch Gambit as white when I was young. So so we're dropping the rook and the knight. So definitely blunder checking is really important, as you stated in your graduation message, Kai. Make sure to think before you instinctively take. Now let's go through and see. I mean, white just kind of left this open. They could have gone here potentially to protect against the fork, and then this is something where you should also be marking your opponent's blunders. Just castling and giving up a rook for nothing doesn't make any sense. Yes, they're a knight still after it, but definitely something to mark when they've also made a blunder and what they could have done. So now you're only down a piece instead of 2 pieces. But here again, can't they just go after this bishop? It's pinned, so we don't have another way to protect it. So it's another chance that they could have won a piece. So that's something you should have marked down as a blunder as well. Was this bishop e7? We left a pawn for nothing there. So that's another one where we should give a question mark to castles. Okay, bishop d3, g6, and he just blunders a piece. And so we go from being 2 pieces down to being only a pawn down, and then somehow we end up winning this from here. So I'm assuming there's another big blunder coming up. Yeah, just losing another piece. Okay. So I'd say, this game was lots of blunders from both sides, and that's why blunder checking is really important at this level. making sure you're not dropping pieces like this. So yeah, so that gives you what you should be working on, Kai. And then how does Jesse? Doesn't he do something like reviewed? How does he do that? Maybe it's just a Jesse thing that he can do. It might just be because he's an admin. Let me see. I'm not seeing it. So sorry if I'm supposed to mark it as reviewed and don't know how to. Yeah. So Kai, I'd say just continue to. Maybe it's here. No. I'd say continue to look for these piece blunders. Make sure that you are looking out for when you're dropping a piece, when your opponent's dropping a piece. And also, while reviewing, just make sure that you're marking down your opponent's mistakes as well as your own, and kind of adding more of your thoughts. So this wasn't very heavily annotated. So the more you can list out your thoughts, the more you can understand why you're going wrong when you are going wrong. So great. Thank you for the game, Kai, and congratulations on your graduation. Let's see. Yellow says this line is a good example where the intuitive knight f6 is a blunder for black. e45, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, knight f6, d4, e takes, knight g5. Okay, the knight g5 like in that game, knight e5, bishop b3, h6, f4. Yeah, I mean, this knight g5, unless I'm wrong, is extremely rare, so I don't know how likely it is to need to study knight g5, but if it's coming up in your games, it's something that you should definitely review and kind of know some of the ideas. But yeah, e4, e5, there's so many gambits that white can do, that black can do. It's an extremely sharp line. So Clash of Bobby says, I want to hit the grad button since I am in the 1800 and 1900 cohort, but Elo now. But if I had any new classical games in the database to review, some point off. It also looks really bad on me because I don't have any dojo points. The biggest issue I'm having with the dojo is it feels like I'm an octopus. I'm supposed to be reading 3 books at once because I entered the dojo at 1700, 1800, meaning I haven't read anything. It feels too uncoordinated for me to follow strictly. Yeah, I would say it's not about reading 3 books at once. It's about choosing which of those books to prioritize. I would not suggest going. So, like, if I go to my training plan, so I'm in the 1800 1900 cohort, just like you are, or you're close to. It's about choosing where you are weakest from your game reviews and selecting the book that is relevant to that's within here. So I think there's like 6 or 7 books I'm supposed to be reading, right? We've got tactics. So I'd say separate from the books is the Polgar mates. Yes, that's a book, but it's just puzzles. So I would say still do your Polgar mates, but that's, I guess, 1 book. Just tactics from scratch. 1001 exercises, read Think Like a Super GM. We're already at 4 books there in just one section. It's not about reading all 4 of those books, along with, there's 3 books, I think, in Middle Game. 2, 3. Master Games is basically another book, but we'll just call it 3. Silman, Sheriff, I can't say Sheriff for some reason today. That was embarrassing. But yeah, so there's 10 books, but it's not about reading 10 books at once. I have looked at my games. I've played, 20 classical games. I've decided that I am horrible at the end games, and so I'm going to go read Silman Endgame. and that will be my focus. And so I will focus on Silman, playing my games, and then solving tactics. Not the tactics books necessarily, so you don't have to go through each of these books at the same time, but solve the program mates, do your daily 10 tactics or something like that. And do that for a month or so, however long it takes you to read the book that you're looking at. Once you're done with that book, then you move on to the next one. So it's not about reading 3 books at once. It's not about necessarily doing the project to check the box, but doing the box to enhance where you're at. So definitely focus on one area at a time. And maybe that's what it tells you to do. So it's telling me to read Sheriff Sheshki. I can't say that anymore. I've read it so many times and mentally I can say it, but apparently I can't say it out loud. But it's telling me to do that, and so that's what I would focus on, and I would finish Sheriff Sheshki Endgame Strategy. I'm sorry, I would finish it, and then I'd move on to the next one. So that's what I would suggest rather than working on 3 at once. Let me go back to what was it? Let me see. Graduations. I keep making poor choices because my intuition and taking a backseat class is taking a backseat. Classical. Because my intuition is taking a backseat. So you're saying like you're not able to use your intuition. You're thinking too much, or what do you mean by your intuition is taking a backseat? Estimate 5% of your online games from Scotch Game go into this. That is interesting. What cohort are you in? Elio Yellow. I don't think I've ever seen 925. Maybe it's a new thing. Um, Someone must have done a YouTube video on it or something. Like I said, I took a couple of years off from chess, and so maybe if it's a newer line, I haven't seen it. Clash Bobby says, I keep telling on ideas I see and stop focusing on just seeing the position. Yeah, so there's a couple ways to approach that through the dojo program. The first would be like looking at master games and thinking about those positions in a positional manner, thinking about it like what is their ideas, etc. And so that is a way to like simulate your games, but then seeing the right moves. So like the dojo recommends looking through certain players' games in the middle game section. Like I think the 1800 and 1900 is all Spassky games. So that can help with that. The other is kind of a calculation method with your identifying candidate moves. And so when you are calculating, you shouldn't be saying, this move, this move, this move, this move, this move in sequence. You should be identifying each branch as you go on potential moves both for yourself and for your opponent. And ideally, 2-3 moves each section you've at least thought of, and then maybe you prune that as you go and say, well, no, that move doesn't make any sense, so I only have this one move. It's forced. So that would probably be, I think like a super GM is in the program at your band, and would probably touch on that. There's other books outside the program, but I don't, as a guest here, I don't know if I should be recommending those. But I do know outside the program, there's, I forget his first name, but Miranda. He has a book about calculation and identifying those candidate moves, etc. So it becomes way too much. This was my idea. I only calculate everything that leads where I want to to go, and I stop using intuition, seeing the forest for all the trees. In non-classical, I don't use this planning or tunneling at all. In classical, it's just the more time I have, the more I become fixated on ideas that are actively disappearing, and I'm missing blunders. I'm definitely readjusting to candidate moves now. Only now identifying why I'm playing 10 times worse in classical than I do in rapid. It's 100% tunneling on ideas the more time I have. Yeah, I mean, if your intuition is strong and your calculation is weak, then it would be that you need to be looking at a structured thought process on calculation. And so I would say, think like a super GM, or Miranda's book on Chessable about calculation would be good places to start for that. And then also understanding why your intuition leads you to certain things and why thinking outside of your intuition is difficult for you. And so that would be more of the looking at master games to see more positions and where your intuition might not be as tuned to those positions. Like if you're very fixated on your current openings and you've only played those openings and you haven't been exposed to other ideas, seeing those through master games is helpful to understand where to come up with certain ideas for your calculation and your candidate moves. Elio Yellow says 2100, 2200 cohort online, around 2300, and all-time controls on Lichess, though I just became a little inactive in the dojo, focus on other stuff. Okay, yeah, that's interesting that, we're roughly the same online ratings, and I have never once seen this knight g5 move. Sorry. If it's coming up a lot, then you just have to kind of add it to your openings, and look through, see if there's any master games. Although, like I said, okay, sorry, you have knight g5 after bishop c4. Yeah. I'd say just kind of add it to your opening repertoire if it's coming up in 5% of your games. That's a lot. Hey Skibix, I'm Mitch Fabian. Sorry, I can't get the overlay to work properly to show my name, etc. We've actually played before, 3 years ago or so. I used to be part of the dojo quite often, but I took a break for family life and work, but I'm back, and Jesse asked me to stream the graduates while he's playing, and we'll also look at his game once we're done with the graduates. I'm also just kind of answering or talking about some stuff with some people in chat right now. So back to the calculation kind of discussion with the YouTube chat with Clash of Bobby. He says, I think it's also that I get so into the idea of attacking despite my strengths being positional play, like my desire is so off from my strengths. I mean, if you really like attacking chess and are looking for that in your games, I would go back to what I said about the master games. Looking at master games, I think your cohort looks at Spassky games. He's a good attacker. I've been looking at his games recently as well, and it's very interesting because I feel like Spassky games aren't shown very often. I think he's pretty much dismissed as a player because he's best known for losing to Fischer, instead of best known for his games. So I'd say look at the games that your cohort suggests and kind of jot down what your intuition is, jot down what your candidate moves are as you're looking at various positions in those games. Very focused study of those games rather than just kind of click, click, click. But just look at them, play as Spassky in those games. Say, if I am white and Spassky is white, what am I looking to do here? And then kind of write down your candidate moves. I always try to come up with multiple candidate moves before going deeper, and then see where Spassky went, where you went, and kind of get that idea. Maybe that will help you with your attacks. And then as you maybe identify themes where you're looking way too often at, bad pawn moves, you can try to address that and see what was the correct way to play in those, and maybe add that to your kind of idea repertoire. Okay, great. We're on to GGK 90, who graduated up to the 900 to 1,000 cohort. Around 1,100 on chess.com, and around 1,700 on Lichess, 1,300 on USCF. That's a very broad range. Interesting. I guess question mark. What does that mean? Ratings are updated every 24 hours. Okay, cool. 1,300 USCF would be above here, so I'm assuming, yeah, chess.com is the preferred method. Okay, I first learned chess as a kid, but now I came back to the game seriously as an adult. Now at 35, I'm an adult improver working to build a stronger, calmer, and more disciplined chess game. In the Philadelphia area, playing USCF tournaments. Great. Well, welcome back to the game. It's always great to come back to something that you loved when you were young. Let's go over some of your games. Let's see, we've got this one here. Was played in June. This was a friendly game on Lichess. Looks like 30-30. It's still provisional rating for me. I am finding it overall difficult to play against the London consistently, but I understand the middle game ideas. All right, so we've got London here. All right, so we're playing this kind of setup here. This is a good setup against London. So we'll see if there's anything as to what you say is what's difficult. Okay, bishop b5, check. Playing knight c6. So we're self-pinning the knight. If they take, we're gonna take back with the pawn, and then since we can on-damage our structure, it's mostly okay. The only concern I would have with this kind of knight c6 move would be maybe there's I guess with the bishop being on b5, there's not an easy way for the knight to move in. So I guess this would be the concern. By self-pinning our knight, we kind of invite white's knight to e5 here. And so that's something to at least watch out for. Looks like we go bishop g4 after knight f3 in this game. So that's kind of GGK's approach to addressing that threat, is pinning as well. So c3, so typical London stuff. e6. Okay, knight b to d2, and bishop d6. So offering the trade of the bishops. Yeah, so far pretty good. Bishop g3 with the idea, as the arrows are pointing out, that white wants to take back with the pawn to open up the rook on the file. So even though there's not really any words, at least GGK is providing some arrows, which is good to see his or her thought process. Castle. So we unpin the knight. I would also suggest putting some note of that. We unpin the knight, which is helpful from preventing this knight from hopping into e5. And so, yeah, I'd say so far so good. Everything seems logical. White unpinned, we grab the better diagonal. Bishop d3. Yeah, and so now we've somewhat transposed into a very typical London setup. So I'm not very used to this bishop coming out to b5. I haven't really seen that very often, although I don't play this exact setup I normally keep the pawn back on d7 myself until later. So that's why I haven't seen the bishop b5. But I think this all became a very logical London. So in the London, once white gets the bishop out of the chain, it often gets traded on d3. The other idea is if you play the e6 move order, you often will trade it off on a6. And so very common for the bishops to trade, the queen to come to d3. So this is your very typical pawn structure. We've got the London structure here. Black has this kind of structure. Black likes to either trade the knight for the bishop, or in this case, it looks like we wanted to trade the bishop for the bishop. So yeah, so I'd say out of the opening, I don't have the engine on to confirm, but I'd say black is equalized. I don't think there's anything wrong with how you've played. You said you find it difficult to play against London. I think you've gotten to a very decent position, and so yeah, I'd say no concerns with how you've played against London so far. So maybe I would ask that you expound a bit more on like what about the London you find difficult? Are you saying you find it difficult to like play for a win? Are you finding it difficult to play? You say you understand the middle game ideas, so maybe it's move orders. I don't know. I think you've played this game well. So I would say no concerns so far about how you play the London. C4 might be a bit early to play c4. I do like keeping this tension, although c4 does usually come. Ideally, the way I've seen it is we're waiting for white to commit the king to the queen side. Once the king goes to the queen side, then we're breaking c4, b5. And so because of that, I've typically, at least I've personally, when I'm playing, typically reserve c4 until later. Although maybe white is threatening to kind of waste your time a bit. So yeah, I don't think it's wrong. I'm just suggesting. Typically, I play the bishop to e7 instead, so we're a bit different. So I think c4 is fine. Queen c2 and rook e8. So I think the arrows are trying to point out that the king is currently uncastled. It'd be helpful to add some of your actual thoughts. GGK. I know Jesse really likes text itself. I'm not seeing like any text at all. Just moves, and so yeah, I would suggest adding some actual thoughts here. I can kind of get what you're saying with the arrows, but yeah, white's main idea is going to be coming into e5, which you obviously cannot take with the knight because then you're forking your pieces. So knight e5, queen c7, knight d to f3, supporting the knight further. Yeah, so I think we might have allowed this a bit too much for allowing this knight to come in here, and but I think we were probably okay as long as we can either play the knight into e4 or maybe back in f6, kicking the knight. Those are kind of some thoughts, at least. Not entirely sure that they're necessary after. So you've got a small line here. Yeah, I'm not sure if I would take with the b pawn. Like if white had already committed to castling queenside, yes, take with the b pawn makes a lot of sense to open the rook here. But right now it's kind of damaging the structure. I guess maybe you have a second shot here, so it's probably okay. But it wouldn't be my first instinct. Excuse me. Oh, we've got GGK in the chat. Thanks. Fairly older game, this one. A lot of my detailed annotations are. Oh, and for review folder. Sorry, I went to my games folder. Let me switch over to that. We've got we've got time. We don't have very many graduates this week, so let's look at for review. If you've got more thoughts, I think that would be more helpful. Round robin and game. Okay, great. Thank you for that, GGK. Round robin game against Dojo player. This game tested my defensive play. However, I lost the tempo in the opening, and it was a constant battle to the end. The attacking play really creates a lot of challenges, and I can see the idea of tempo really played out in this game for white. Good game. All right, so again, we've got GGK. Oh, great. It's another London-esque position, so it kind of goes more with what GGK said at the start of the last game, that they're working on playing against the London a bit more. So it's a Jobava London, which is a bit different. One of the main ideas of, one of the main threats of the Jobava London is going to be against the C7 pawn. If white is able to attack that a bit more. Maybe not immediately, but that's at least something to know when you're playing this C5 move, is that white can try to go after this C7 square a bit more. I personally play A6 against it just to never worry about that, but it's not necessary. C5, E3, knight C6, and placing the blunder question marks on here because yes, they do go after this threat here. So in my mind, I am continuing normal development without understanding what just happened here. In this game, a lot was decided in the opening. Now I know for future games of how to counter this move. E takes, and A6. Yep. So you can either, C takes, E takes, and A6. You can either play this C5 method and A6 later, like you say here, which it's good that you've pointed out that you know how to do this now. Or like I said, you can also just start with A6 here. Is another way to do it. And then play for either C5 later or bishop here, and then E6 followed by C5. So those are kind of some ideas. So great job finding the better way to counteract this kind of opening. It is a bit shocking the first time that you fall into this. So queen A5 check to gain some time. So I now consider other possibilities. Also now, if I am able to block the light square bishop's diagonal, I can win a knight. The threat on C7 is still looming. And then you give a line here, E5, bishop takes, knight takes, D takes, then D7. So this also prevents the knight to C7 idea. One thing to both help yourself and when you're looking back at the games, whenever you give these variations, I always suggest in comments, or is that how you do it? Let's see. Maybe I can't do it because it's not mine. But you should be able to mark the evaluation. And so I always try to end my variations with an evaluation. So that way I know, am I saying E5 was better? Or is this just something I thought of, and then in this position, do I think it's equal? Do I think maybe in the game we're worse off, but this is better, but not quite equal, something like that. It's always helpful. C3, so kind of getting this typical London pawn structure. And then now E5. So similar to what GGK was thinking of with an earlier E5. Now they see that's the way to kind of protect the C7 square. D takes E5 with a question mark. Definitely feel white was better taking the bishop. After bishop takes, knight takes, D takes, knight D7, queen takes D5. Valuation suggested by someone else. I can't actually see what the valuation is because it's blocked by that. But yeah, if you put an evaluation there, it's helpful. So now we go C4. Okay. So that was a bit surprising, especially we've got an arrow here. So let's see, C4, the idea is to stop the bishop's protection of the knight. One thing, c4. Let me just see what you say. With c4, once white takes my knight on f3, f6, I can get back white's knight on b5, which has been sort of a pain to deal with. I consider this idea, but the threat on c7 is still a problem. e6, f takes. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So with this, my concern is there's two ways for them to check and then still have this knight hanging, and also just in general, taking. If we take, you know, they can take on here. If we take, you know, it's probably okay. Getting our bishop to g7's fine. We just might not have very much king safety later. But yeah, so I'd suggest at least kind of placing your evaluation on those lines. I'm looking at, you know, if here, you know, this is an attack on the queen, so it's at least something to look at. You know, I think black is still probably okay. You know, we probably, where do we place the queen? Do we go back to b6? Probably threatening this pawn. Yeah, I mean, this is probably okay for black. But at least, you know, noting this because this is a forcing variation. It's important to at least have looked at that in the game. So sorry, we actually see knight d6 check, bishop takes, and then of course, you know, once they've taken the piece, it's no longer threatening the other piece, and so, you know, we're okay. But now there's a very menacing pawn, I guess is the way to put it, although it's probably going to be able to be captured fairly easily. The concerns we have with this is if white can dispose of your pawn on d5 somehow, they can protect it a bit more. And it's not fairly easy to prevent that. You know, there's just going to be some sort of e4 potentially coming, maybe even f3, then e4. So that way, if there's any captures, you can push it, the new pawn, to e5. So yeah, I guess if you give white enough time, that pawn can be a big threat. If you don't give them time, you can probably gang up on it pretty quickly. So you say, I have to deal with this pawn. White played well in throwing problems for me to consistently deal with. It kept me out of attacking ideas. It's a good lesson. Castles, it makes sense. We're going to get the king to safety as well as have ideas of getting the rook onto d8, and then potentially, you know, something like knight to e8 to attack the pawn, you know, or probably better is to e4, as long as you're not inviting too much of a f3 e5 f3 e4 combination. Yeah, so castling makes sense. a3. With a3, I am always scared. It feels like a queen trap is in progress, especially since the queen is vulnerable on that side of the board. a3 was not a good move on my part. Oh, see, Esteveras is your opponent, Majsnak. However you pronounce that. My apologies. So it's great that you're commenting back and forth. I didn't have a queen trap in mind. I was worried about the consequences of knight b4, c takes, and queen takes. I wanted to have the option of castling queenside, but I having to worry about queen takes a2. The king side was totally undeveloped, and though I'm still playing a castle kingside, I wanted to have the option of doing otherwise. It feels, if things get heated, admittedly none of these plans hold up looking at them now. Yeah, I would say definitely you're not wanting to castle queenside at this point. Typically, queenside, once you've moved the c pawn, is a little precarious. So now that you've moved c3, and I'm referring to your opponent here now, Esteveras, yeah, once you move c3, you're kind of not really shouldn't be thinking too much about queenside castling. So I think a3 doesn't really, if that was part of the reasoning, doesn't make a ton of sense. And now you've also kind of made a hole now on b3, potentially for once the queen moves, the knight coming in like that. So let me take away my arrows so that I'm not messing up what was already there. Yeah, so a3. I mean, it's not a horrible move, but I don't think it's necessary based off at least what you've said. I think instead, White should really be thinking about how do we get the king side developed to castle, but also how do I potentially protect this pawn? And so those are my two thoughts here. So either how do I get these two pieces out, or how do I play like f3, e4? Maybe it's too early to do that. Maybe we do need to castle first, but at least like those are the thoughts running through my head from this position that you should be considering, that both sides should be considering. I don't think there's really any queen trap coming because the queen always has d8. We played queen d8 right away, which is, Jesse would say controversial, is how he comments on a lot of moves. Yeah, it's a if we can identify that there is no queen trap coming, which there's no pieces over here, is kind of part of where my head goes to. There's no pieces. How are we trapping? Yes, maybe rook d8 takes away that square, which it can be a bit scary. But I mean, if we go rook d8, let me see. If we go rook d8, they come here. Well, first of all, you have to consider this, which I don't think is good, so you don't do it. But if you do go here, there's no piece over here to threaten the queen more, to control the queen more. And so if there's ever this idea, you can still go back to b5. Yeah, maybe it's getting a little scary, but without pieces on this side of the board, it's really hard to see the queen getting trapped. And at any point, you can also just go straight up a5. So let's say we go here. I'm not saying these are the very best moves, but you have a5. So the idea isn't that what I said each of these moves is the best, but there is no way that I'm seeing that they can trap your queen because there's no pieces involved in the trap. So that's kind of, I guess, the concept there is more just look for. It's very hard to constrict a piece without actual pieces. Yes, you can do it pawns sometimes, but especially a queen who has so much mobility, it's hard to do. So, all right, queen d8, knight f3. Well, it's catching up in development here and threatening knight e3. I think maybe they mean knight e5. Honestly, I'm not very happy playing against the Lenin. It's always been my downfall. It leads to such dynamic play, and black is consistently dealing with problems. Bishop g4. Pinning knight, developing pieces. I also want the pawn on d6, so I'm thinking ways I can get that back. One option was knight e1. Yeah, I think some of your notes, the labeling is wrong. Maybe you meant knight e8 here. Although that's kind of, I mean, it's eventually something to consider, but I liked it better after playing the rook out to d8, so that way we're not trapping the rook in. Bishop e2, rook e8, castles. This is my idea behind rook e8. So after knight e5, got knight takes e5, protecting the bishop. So if they do an in-between move, we can take back and we're up the piece. Bishop takes e5, rook takes e5. Bishop takes g4, knight takes, queen takes, and queen takes d6. Okay, so this was why they planned on rook e8. Instead, they castle, and we have knight e4, which GG K has said question mark. Okay. Knight e4. I wanted to get the pawn back on d6. Probably a mistake, as it allowed queen takes d5, losing another pawn, add more pressure on the d file. That's hyper focused on getting the pawn on d6 out of there, which caused me problems. Maybe I wanted to kick the dark square bishop out of its position. I would open my king for attack, but at this point I think I was playing with a very attacking focus. Yeah, and I think this is part of why a lot of players conceptually struggle against the London. It is very hard to attack the London if the king goes to the king side. If the king goes to the queen side, there's a lot more pawn breaks on the queen side that black can play for. It's quite hard to attack the London, but that's the nature of playing with the black pieces. Unfortunately, is it's very hard to get an attack against a very solid opening like the London. Other things like the four knights, e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, knight c3, knight f6. It's very hard to attack against that. If white chooses to play solidly instead of for an attack themselves, it's quite hard to play against it for an attack. So I'd say really focus on being solid instead of always wanting an attack. So you're trying to go for f5 in a position where it's not really what the position calls for, and then especially just giving up the d pawn, like I identified like way back when we were talking, was that this pawn is weak as so long as we have a pawn on d5, and so identifying that pawn on d5 is what makes the e pawn weak. The d pawn weak, and that if that d5 pawn goes away, the d6 pawn becomes so much stronger. If you have that concept in your mind, you probably wouldn't make this mistake, right? Because that d5 pawn is what's preventing white from having an extremely strong pawn instead of a potentially strong pawn where it is currently. So, all right, so we gave up a piece for the pawn. And what are the tactics? Rook e6. So it's a pinned bishop, so we're getting it back is the idea. So we didn't actually give up a piece. Bishop takes c4. So we've lost a pawn, or are we down 2 pawns? Let's see. We're down 2 pawns, right? And we're getting the piece back, but we're down 2 pawns, so that's really did not turn out well. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I'd say white should be quite a bit better here, and then we're also the issue with trying to get our the way that we would like it prior to losing the c4 pawn, the way we would have liked to take back is with the rook to gain time on the queen, but now we can't do that because of the f7 square. So this was a really good move, bishop takes c4, but also something you probably should have seen, although I'm not entirely sure based off of your comments if you understood that you were losing the d pawn with knight e4, or if you completely missed queen takes d5. If you completely missed queen takes d5, of course, you couldn't have calculated up to this point. But if this was something that you intended to trade the d pawn for the d pawn, this is something you should have at least identified at that point. Your opponent says I was seriously considering knight g5, but didn't dare because I thought it was losing after bishop takes e2, knight takes e6, bishop takes f1. So let's just put that on the board. They're considering this, and after bishop takes f1, but the knight on e6 is attacking the queen, and after, yeah, so that was what was missed there. So after knight takes e6, there is here, which this is a check. The skills did not reach. Oh, this was already in there. Sorry, I don't reach this far during the game. Yeah, so the knight g5 was possible. The only other thing is you didn't look at queen takes. So what would have, I know that your opponent's probably not in the chat, but just something to think of is what would have White's plan been here? I guess you take, and take. So up the piece. So that's why you can't do that. But and then of course the rook capturing is hanging f7. So good there. So yeah, bishop. Yeah. So knight g5 looks like it would have been a really good move potentially. But also bishop takes c4 is already clear advantage for White. So shouldn't be too hard from here. So they decide to trade queens. And then we're also giving up the f7 pawn, so now we're down 3 pawns. Yeah, and from here it's, I don't know if f4 is necessary. Giving up the e3 pawn. I know that yeah, I mean, you've got the knight and the bishop hanging. Yeah, I guess f4 is necessary. But also, yeah, okay, bishop takes was necessary as well. Maybe here it's just better to not have all those complications. Something like this. So I think maybe it got a little bit overcomplicated because of that, but White gets out of it, so it's only a 2-pawn advantage. Yeah, and then from here, this should just be winning for White. Is it? Yeah, White wins in the end. Okay. Yeah, from here, you're down 2 pawns. We've kind of identified a few of the key areas for you to think a bit more on. I'd say one is knowing this idea a bit better against the Jabava London. That a6 is a very necessary move either here or a bit later. I think just for simplicity, so you never have to worry about the c pawn or the c7 squares, just play it here. Well, that's up to you on if you want to do c5 first and then a6, like in your notes. So I'd say that's the first thing to be aware of. And then the second thing to be aware of is just identifying at this point that the only way for this pawn to remain weak is for our pawn to remain on d5. Blocking off any other piece from protecting it or any other pawn from protecting it. And so understanding that our d5 pawn is key to keeping this pawn potentially weak. That way you never try to trade them for each other or anything like what happened in the game where you kind of then got on the back foot. So great. Good game, GGK. Thank you for pointing out where your game was saved, and my apologies for kind of wasting your time on the other one. But good game, and congratulations on the graduation. Thank you, QuadX, for continuing your subscription. I get none of that, but the dojo is happy with that. So, okay, great. Let me check if there's been any other chats. I apologize for not being super on top of that. Thoughts on democratizing chess against Gen Z? Okay, I don't know what you mean by that. All right, next up is Ryora. My apologies if I'm mispronouncing it. They've moved up to the 1,000 cohort. Been playing or been part of the dojo, it looks like, since June. Since late June, so about a month or so. And in that time, looks like they've played one classical game. Is there a way that I can see? Yeah, one classical game. So yeah, I would suggest playing some more classical games. It looks like mainly just doing tactics. I'm not seeing any like maybe it's a tactics book, but I'm not seeing otherwise like potential other books. So yeah, I'd say probably play some more classical games, so that way you can continue to learn from those. Let's see your games. Looks like played one game recently. The other ones are from 2 years ago. All right, so we've got Ryora playing as white against d4 e6. We've transposed from a typical d4 opening into a French, although white or black doesn't realize they're in the French. Plays knight c6. Yeah, this is really weird. I have no idea what this would even be called. Is there a way to? Does that happen here? Can you see? Yeah, white's scoring massively in this. It, I don't know if your opponent is listening at all, but yeah, the French you don't play knight c6. One of the main ideas of the French is that you're gonna have the c5 break. And so yeah, this is very strange. I feel like they were trying to do Nimzo but avoid the trump, but then they don't actually play the French or something. Because yeah, I mean, I would think if they were trying like the English defense or something is the other way that you kind of play e6, you would probably be trying for b6 after e4. If that was their attempt, if they really didn't want the French. Yeah, this is weird. Bishop e2 was thinking that I don't want to allow checks on my king. I decided to try to set up for castling while developing my bishop. Yeah, it's logical. Knight f6, castles, bishop e7. Yeah, so yeah, white's gotten a decent position. You know, at some point we can try to kick the queen with either c. I keep doing too long. c4 or knight to c3. Yeah, very strange play from black so far. The only potential idea I could see from black is, you know, we've got b6 at some point, and then we've got this battery. But otherwise, like I just don't understand what they've been doing. You know, we're going to prevent that battery by going knight to c3 soon, either c4 and then knight c3 or knight c3 by itself. I would prefer c4 myself before that, but yeah, very strange. We go knight c3 instead, which is fine. Like I said, you can go c4 first if you want, or you can go knight c3. It's kind of depending on how you like to play the position. The idea with c4 would just be that, you know, it can't move once the knight's there, and you gain a little bit more central space. Queen d8, and so this has been like some sort of like Scandi, Queen d8 Scandi, I guess, but they didn't get the bishop out before. Hey. I don't know. I don't think you'll see this line very often. This is a blunder. Since the knight on c6 is no longer pinned to the king, and my pawn on d4 is now hanging. Yeah. I suggest actually putting in the question mark or double question mark just so that it stands out to you when you're reviewing later. Yeah, so we lost the pawn, and our bishop's under attack. We go bishop d3, h6, knight g to e4, knight f5. I was thinking you might progress more like this. Knight takes, e5. The position felt like I would have a lot of pieces attacking the king side, so I has to sacrifice with bishop takes h6. Yeah, playing for activity since you're down a pawn makes sense. Your bishops are both pointing at the king. Yeah, makes sense. Instead, they went knight f5, and you took. King, queen g4, queen d4. They're trying to offer a queen exchange since they're up a pawn. It's probably their thinking. Knight e4, getting another piece over towards the king side. Bishop e5. Rook b1, protecting b2. Bishop d7, king h1. And then push f4. Yeah, I guess f4 can make sense. The downside of f4 is that you're going to block in this bishop on c1. The positive idea is that you can rook lift, so it makes sense. Threatening the knight now. This line looks bad, so I didn't play f4. f4. Bishop takes. Takes e5. Bishop. Yeah. Yeah, because f4 blocks the protection, so that makes sense as to why you didn't play it. Queen e2. Black's kind of gotten a nice setup now, though. They're attacking, they're up the pawn. Queen d5. f3, blunting that diagonal, that's a good idea. Knight to d4. I realize that is hanging another pawn. Yeah, queen takes. Yeah, so that would have been unfortunate. It's hard when you move the rook off of protection at a2. It can fall sometimes. Queen f2. Still leaving that pawn hanging. f5. Knight g3. At this point, things didn't feel too great, and I felt like I had lost control of the center, and my a2 pawn was still hanging. And he strangely plays bishop to e8. What's the idea here? Yeah, I don't know what the idea was there. I think just he should have just gotten his rook involved or taken the hanging pawn. b3, it's kind of a sad concession. To stop that, I guess the one benefit is he could potentially move bishop b2 at some point, although that doesn't feel great to do either. f4. This pawn feels like it kind of helped with my defense because it blocked off the dark square bishop's line of sight. Yeah, it blocks the dark square bishop and opens up your light square bishop. So I'd say f4, and it gives you potentially back the e4 square. Yeah, I'd say f4 is a mistake. It doesn't quite make sense. You know, this diagonal is blocked, and so this diagonal is the important one. I mean, they're still up a pawn, and still kind of look to be better. I really don't understand what they're doing with these like bishop e8 and queen d7 moves. They're kind of just. Why not just just take it or support it with like c5 or something like. I don't know. Strange. They've made a lot of really strange moves. I feel like this would have been more annoying to me because I don't want the queen trade with the pawn down. So queen takes, queen takes, yeah. Queen h4, bishop e5, bishop a3, queen f7. Yeah. Yeah, it looks like your opponent got a pawn early and then just kind of stopped playing logical moves at some point. Like they've made a lot of really strange moves, and then now they've given up a ton of material. Now you're up, and they weren't like even attacking moves. Like I see someone going too all out in attacks, sacrificing when they should, but they're just kind of shuffled and lost pieces somehow. Yeah. So from here, it's just winning. I mean, you're up 2 pieces. So okay. Yeah. Or sorry, I guess just a rook. I thought at some point it was pieces, but you must have traded the pieces. Yeah, you were up in exchange, and then they lost a piece, so that's why. Yeah, so yeah, I'd say just stay a bit more focused in the opening. I think you didn't. I didn't think you had an idea what was going on. Maybe that's why you lost the pawn. But otherwise, your opponent played poorly and gave back the material later. So, yeah, just stay focused. I know it was a semi-fast time control, but you still have plenty of time. So just make sure you're not dropping pieces like that. So thank you, Cantana Chess, for the raid. For those joining, I'm not one of the senseis. I apologize. I was not able to get my overlay worked out, but Mitch Fabian, I am a friend of the dojo. I used to play quite often in the dojo a few years ago, at this point, like 8 years ago was when I started. And then I took some time off of chess for the last 3 years or so, 3 years for my career and my kids. And I'm back recently, the last 3 months or so. And Jesse is playing in a tournament, and Kostya is playing in a tournament. And so they asked me to cover the graduate show. So the graduate show is the dojo training program. They've worked their ratings up to the point where they're able to move up to the next cohort. And so the training program is divided into rating bands and cohorts, where certain rating bands are given a training plan that changes slightly as you move up in rating. And so once you've reached a rating point, or you've already reached the rating point and also the comfort in the program, you're able to click the graduate button and move up to the next cohort. So all these members that we're looking at their games of did that, and then after we're done with that, we're going to look at Jesse's game in the U.S. Senior Championships. So yeah, congratulations to Ryuora on that win. But yeah, I'd say just make sure to play a few more games. You only had 1 game in the last. It's been 2 years since your previous classical game, so play some more classical games, and that will help you as you move up. So then next up, we've got Capratz. Oops, sorry. Tactics and Annotated Master Games are the best training I had. I'm still having a hard time playing classical games because I can't really focus online and haven't joined a club yet. But maybe I'll be able to play in a tournament in a few months. Great thing about annotated games is that they provided me some mental game plans to implement so that I avoided drifting and blundering in games. Avoiding blunders is still the main thing in this rating group. The classical games I played are OTB with a friend, and then I annotated each game and published the ones I found interesting. Great. Yeah, classical games online, if you struggle with focusing, that can be a very serious problem. I think a lot of people have that as an issue. And so I'd suggest trying to play more OTB. a lot of places have like 1 game a week type things that you can join and potentially just, play one of those games or so if you're busy. So, um, and then, the other thing is maybe as you play more often online, you'll get used to that focus. All right. So it looks like they've been part of the dojo since about May. Um, Maybe a bit last year, and then they took a break and then got back to the dojo around May. So looks like some good progress. 14 classical games in the past year, making good progress through end games is a big focus that they're having. Okay, great. Um, yeah, no clubs. Looks like, oops. Okay, so the last classical game was from about a month ago. So we'll go ahead and look at that. I'd say, as I said, try to play more. That really helps, especially at the lower rating bands. Playing is a good way of identifying what you need to be focusing on. So, so Bratz is playing black. We've got a Queen's Gambit declined. And so Bishop G5. One quote unquote problem with this move order is that the exchange variation works very nicely here for white. I mean, it's nothing like extremely serious, but if you look at the master, or this is the dojo, it's scoring over 50% in the dojo, and in masters, it's also scoring over 50% of wins, and then an additional 26% draws. So we're looking at 65% score for white here. So it's a very serious opening, and so I'd suggest if you're going to play Queen's Gambit declined, there's a few like side steps to that. I think it's I think there's like an H6 move here, or an A6 move also comes to mind. But otherwise, this is the main reason that we see the Nimzo as an opening, right? We prevent that, and then if white instead goes here, now we have a much safer version of the Queen's Gambit declined. Just something to think about. It doesn't matter a ton, but I'm just pointing that out as something to think on. Bishop e7 was played, breaking the pin, knight f3, castles, e3, h6, bishop takes f6. I don't face this move too often, and I'm not prepared for it. However, I gladly welcome it because I like the bishop pair. Yep. Bishop pair is nice. And they say that they expected this line. E takes, yeah, not only do they give you the bishop pair, but they also allow you your bishop on c8 has been quote unquote fixed. You can get out. So yeah, I'd say they've made some slight errors in how they've gotten to this position, but it's still playable. It's just not as favorable of an exchange as what I had shown previously. This is the first position I was playing on my own. I find myself considering a variety of moves, but then I realized that I couldn't play knight d7, so I would have to play c6 at some point anyway. Yeah, so this is the Carlsbad structure. You've got white has let me just put that in the note. Carlsbad structure. White has this nice pawn chain. You can think of it kind of as 5 pawns on the king side and 2 on the queen side. Yeah, I mean the d4 pawns technically on the queen side, but the chain is connected there. Versus black has 4 on the queen side, 3 on the king side. So typically, black is going to try to play a bit on the queen side. White's going to try to break here. on the king side using their majority. And depending on the starting position of the structure, white can have a really nice game, but it's definitely not bad for black. Although this position, the reason why, getting back to this, the reason why this is so nice for white is we haven't committed the knight to f3 yet, and so we can actually play f3 with our e4, and that becomes like that's why white is scoring so well in this position. So yeah, the Carlsbad structure is something, if you're going to play the Queen's Gambit Declined, become very familiar with this. Right away loses the pawn to Queen b3, c5, d takes. This should be good, but I'm not sure how to proceed for black. Bishop takes c3. This line was found with an engine. B takes c3, knight d7. Bishop g4, and they say equal. Yeah, so I'd say, yeah, we're in a very typical Carlsbad where white didn't get f3 in, so I'd say usually it's going to be fairly equal, although it's hard to know for certain without turning on the engine. But I'm assuming this is black is okay here, and it's roughly equal. Black is the bishop pair, which is nice, but yeah, it's it's probably one that I'd say I'd prefer to play black rather than white. So I don't know what the engine eval is, but I'd say because of that, it's equal or maybe slightly better for black, in the sense that the bishop pair in a typical Carlsbad structure without white having an easy f3, yeah, I'd say this is good for black. Now it's much more effective. I really like the position out of the opening. I have the bishop pair in a solid position. h3, bishop h5, queen b6. Yeah, so it's a typical idea that you see in some openings. Yeah, so I guess one issue with bishop g4 and somewhat how the game proceeded is that they could at some point try to force you to trade bishops, and then you no longer have the pair. You do have the bishop versus knight. I don't know in this position exactly, but just something to keep an eye on. That structure kind of gets a bit damaged, and then you don't have bishop pair anymore. So yeah, I'll just mark these arrows. A4, I think this move is fine. But a bit hasty. Rook b1, b4, a4, b5 is probably better plan in my opinion. Okay, you do actually have g4. Okay, so I can remove my arrows. Sorry. This shouldn't be an issue. Yeah, I mean, I think this is fine. I'm just saying, like, you give up a bit of your structure and a bit of your advantage with bishop pair. So I'd say that's one of the issues with your response of bishop h5. I don't know what the engine says, but I'd say this position much harder to play than say, I don't know, this position. So just something to think on. Although they didn't go for it, and it feels a little weird to go g5 anyway, or g4. So missing that my pawn was not defending anymore after knight d7. I guess I'm used to having a knight on f6. Yeah, that's unfortunate. So we lose a pawn there. But I guess we don't lose a pawn because this knight is pinned. They could. Can they do any? I don't know about in this exact position. Maybe earlier. Is there any? These should at least be looked at. ideas. I don't necessarily know if they're working, but I would suggest that you look at these because it breaks the pin and allows for you to win a pawn rather than allows for white to win a pawn rather than just giving it back right away. At least be considered in your calculation in case white is truly winning a pawn. Yeah, so just something to at least look at. Knight e5, bishop e2, knight takes f3. Evaluated this, but I missed that the bishop was attacking b2 after the knight moves. Bishop takes, knight takes. Yeah. So had an opportunity to win a pawn there. Takes, queen takes. I realized after the game that this is not precise. My opponent suggests a different move, which is better. Controls e5 and threatens f5. Yeah, it's very hard to make as like a very inhuman move because of weakening a structure like that. So it makes sense they missed it. e5, queen e7, no, he's low pressing. Yeah. Yeah, and this is now super good for black. We went from a few areas where white potentially was starting to get better to quite a few conceptually wrong moves in a row, where black was like white was like hell bent on trading queens for some reason. But yeah, now that you've got your passer is now connected to another pawn, you know this is good for black. Bishop g4. Yeah, this is quite a few mistakes from white. Not understanding that their bishop is incredibly important to stop these pawns, and now they traded a worse bishop off for it. Oh no. No. Yeah. This is completely winning now. Completely winning now. Yeah, so good job capitalizing on your opponent's mistakes. I think this is a really well played game. There's a few spots where I'd say that you should probably be considering your opponent's moves a bit more. I think most of your thoughts and annotations were like what you could have done better, but there's a few places where I would have liked to see what your opponent could have done better. But yeah, a well played game. I'd say just keep playing more classical games, and you'll get to improve more. So great game. Thank you for sharing, and congratulations on graduating. Okay. All right. So next up would be Held to Cap. Looks like they graduated from the 1200 to 1300 to the 1300 1400. Great. They've been with the dojo since April, it looks like. So, about 3 months. Okay, it looks like a bit longer, but they took a break for a couple months. It's totally fine, totally understandable. I'm not seeing very many classical games. It looks like only one in the past year. So I would suggest playing a bit more in Quebec. So they're Canadian, and they haven't played a game for half a year. Oh, wait, no, sorry. That's date created to be games and tournaments. Half a year, yeah. And they haven't played any online games. Yeah, so strong suggestion to play more often and annotate those games. That's how you get better. That's a key tenet of the dojo. So it looks like we don't have any games to review there. San57 is the next one. Oops, I forgot to read their comment. Enjoying working through the program activities. I wish people were more responsive when trying to arrange round robin matches. Yeah, I know that the round robin organizers are thinking on that, and it's quite difficult. I used to organize tournaments for the dojo. It is very hard with when there's a lot of people to get them to keep playing. I do suggest the open classical tends to be a bit more responsive because you're forced to play a game within a week. But when there's such open-endedness, it's quite hard. So I'm sorry to hear that, but I would suggest that like once a week cadence of the classical rather than the round robin. Looks like quite a bit of activity since February or so was when it looks like they joined the dojo. We've got Lee Chess Classical of 1850, Chess.com of about 1400, and English Chess Federation of 1500. Great, so looks like they're doing quite a bit of tactics mainly and some endgame. Yeah, tactics endgames. They've played 26 classical games, that's great. Looks like no progress on middle games, so I'd suggest maybe looking at some of that and seeing if that helps as well. Let's look at their games. Last one was about 3 weeks ago, so let's go ahead and look at that. All right, so Sans is playing black. We've got a Sicilian Grand Prix attack. E6, knight f3, g6, d5, bishop b5. In line from the master's database. I don't like it. Yeah, I mean, if you don't like these structures, you don't have to play it. G6 is perfectly fine. Yeah, I mean, I think d5 is probably one of the main moves, or even a6 and then d5, but you don't have to if you don't like the structure. Bishop g7. Okay, it says computer doesn't like this plus 1.4 swing and an evaluation to white. Here first. Yeah. So the reasoning behind is that white gets this nice structure against the bishop, right? So it's really hard for the bishop to break through here. And now that we've already played our d-pawn, we can't as easily break. And so that's why it's even gone back to f8, which I don't think any human would start bishop f8 with that, but yeah. So that's the issue. So I would just really make note in your repertoire. How do I want to address this? I would suggest if you like the g6, I would suggest a6 here. Suggestion to prevent bishop e5 lines so that you can still play your preferred g6 structure. Yeah, so that's one idea that you could incorporate and have learned from this game. White doesn't punish the setup and kind of plays more in this style of trying to get this pawn chain. Queen e1, yeah. So this is typical Grand Prix attack. Grand Prix attack. The queen is coming out to here, and f5 is coming. It is kind of the idea of the Grand Prix. d5, queen h4. Computer doesn't like queen h4 and wants black to go into d4 with the knight. Yeah, a6 was another idea. Just trade off that bishop. One downside of this is that we've kind of moved one of our defending pieces away from the king. So I understand why maybe you didn't want to go for that. Or like here, you take with the pawn. is an idea. Let's see what the comment is. I know from my experience playing white in this line that black can get a lot of play attacking the doubled C pawns, but my opponent doesn't do that in this in the game. After b takes c6, computer gives white a 1.5 advantage, a swing of almost 2. It'd be good to note why you didn't want to take with the knight in this case. One difference here with what I had said earlier. Sorry, you do give a line here. One difference here is like this is threatening a queen trade. White is trying to attack. Any Grand Prix attack player, especially the kind that goes for this kind of thing, wants to attack. They're not going to trade queens. And so, if they try something, it might get a little bit in their head that, they want to go like here, queen h3. And then, you've got ideas of e5, maybe not in this exact position. So let me, there might be this idea. But, that you kind of put them on the back foot by offering a queen trade is kind of what I'm going for here. If knight g5, h6, knight f3, queen takes, we trade queens and we're black is better. After queen takes, d8, rook d8, e5, bishop d7, bishop d2, a5, b3, f6. Yeah, so that's the only way that you're going to break through and get this bishop out is with an f6 break. I think queen d8 is very unlikely from a Grand Prix attack player. So, yes. So that's why I would suggest the knight takes in this case. Whereas, back here when we talked about if it was a bit earlier, there wasn't the queen trade threat, and it probably is fine, but to take with the knight, but you're removing a defender. So, computer wants white to go after c5 pawn with knight a4. This loses most of white's advantage. Yeah, white's moving around a lot. And then knight e5. White really should be looking for ways to get f5 to work instead of moving so much with this knight. f6. So we've made white move again. This is a little ugly, but maybe it's fine. Rook b4. Not sure where that rook's going. This doesn't do anything. Possibly a5 followed by bishop a6 might be better. Yeah. a3. We gave them a free tempo. It's not a super useful tempo. Played to mitigate the effect of f5, which would leave the pawn on h6 undefended. Peter says preferable was e5, rook b7, or c4. One thing to note, Sans, is I would suggest you often say what the computer likes or likes better. Maybe take it a few more moves out and say why, like the idea behind it would be helpful for your understanding as to why the computer likes certain things. Like e5, one part about e5 as black is it prevents e5 from white. So now you say e5 equals. Instead, f takes, knight f5, queen e1, knight d4. Seems okay for black, who had a bad bishop on c8. This may get out after a5 or help defend with bishop d7 to e8. Queen f2, queen e7, g4. I saw this after I played knight f5, unfortunately. So now I have to complicate to try to get some chances slash tricks. Computer thinks black is okay with d4. Question mark. So knight d4 is what they're saying. Computer black is okay with knight d4. Computer agrees with this assessment. Yeah, winning a piece. Check. Yeah. Yeah, so I think knight d4 was a good opportunity there. It seems like slightly more logical as well. I'm not entirely sure why we played d4. I feel like that complicates things. I feel like knight d4 was more logical and better. Because now our knight's like trapped, right? And I guess you have the e3 square, but what, after knight e3? Oh, sorry. Yeah, we lose a pawn there, and this is weak. Yeah, so I think knight d4 really was a big miss, unfortunately. Is that the white's only play? It's just getting the pawn. Yeah, because the rook's under attack. Okay. Yeah, double C pawns are a problem. Your kingside's still a problem. Yeah, white's much better. Avoid the skewer, bishop takes. So white's up 2 pawns now. Rook f7, bishop d6. Yeah. This black wins in the end. Okay, how on earth does black win this? You just completely lost here. Does it just become time trouble? I'm really not understanding. You're down in exchange and 2 pawns. Rook e3. I don't know about h4. I like to keep that file for the rooks, right? I mean, you just dupe, you know? h4 is a bit odd. Then rook h, yeah. Not the cleanest way to break through, but I mean, kind of makes sense, I guess. It's so perpetual. Is this what happened? It'd be nice to know in here. It looks like you don't have where your mistake is wrong. I guess queen g3. Computer running with the king lets white win. So is it here you have to go with this check instead? Yeah, queen c1. Be nice if you noted that as the mistake. And then yeah. Okay, and then we're just perpeting. Okay. It'd be important to note that because like, knowing how to perpetual from here is important. Because that's the only. I mean, you're down so much material. You should be looking for that possibility. Then you're noting that you can win the rook if rook f2 occurs. So bishop f3. Wow. Wow. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's why you don't resign. That's why you don't resign. I don't know why rook takes f5 was played. And then black wins. They out of time. Okay. I mean, it was kind of lost anyway, but wow, just kind of miraculous, but good counterattack. I mean, you were completely lost, and they kind of just let you get a nice counterattack for a perpetual that then actually turned into winning. Turned into winning. So good job. Keep up, that kind of counterattacking mindset. That's how you get away with things like that. Great. And then the last graduation for the week is from Mate in 35, 10th graduation. Am I the first? I feel myself getting stronger. 10 graduations, and each of them's 100 points, so that means that you probably start around 500, so great job. Funny moves that people in my club don't see and have been calculating much more cleanly. That said, things that used to be strengths of mine are becoming weaknesses as I've neglected them in favor of calculation training. Get bad positions on the opening somewhat regularly, whereas I used to be far more booked up than my opponents. Likewise, I used to be sharper in quick tactics than my opponents. I feel that advantage is mostly gone. Going forward, I think I have to work on becoming more technical, sharp calculations, ability to grind out rook endgames, better pawn play, better opening prep. I also need to get back into the curriculum and spend less time messing around with blitz and bullet, especially bullet. Bullet is like kebab, wonderful, fun, satisfying at the time, but probably better off as an occasional treat. If possible, please review this game. As always, thanks as always. Okay, they give the game. Let me copy the game, and then let me just also look at the profile. Texan living in Germany that became a chess chess in January 24 after playing. Then I played a lot of chess. Cool. About 1700 FIDE. I mean, if you've made progress all the way up from 500, you probably, started out and then learned a bit more. So that's great. Rapid progress is always fantastic. I'd say, based off of, what you had set in your thing, I'd say it might not be that your strengths have become weaknesses, but more so that, your opponents are also stronger in those now, especially, if you're focused on where you were at as a 500 or as an 1,000, and now you're 1,500. So I don't necessarily think that they've become weaknesses, but maybe they're just not as relatively strong. So I'd still continue to work on your well-roundedness and improving. So let's see, this game you're playing black, Sicilian. We've got d6, so you transpose into a classical. So Rouser variation, e6, queen d2, bishop e7. Very typical stuff. Crazy looking move, but I figured I had to play e5 before they did so that I don't get blown off the board. The square bishop will be a problem, but I hope the dynamics of the situation will prevail. Yeah, bishop d7 is more common. give a few variations here. So we get back our pawn on c3. Be helpful to give evaluations at the end of these, because you give a lot of lines, and so it's helpful to know which are trimmed because they're bad for white, or which you like better, etc. Queen d2, h6. E takes f4. Yeah, this is an interesting position. And you're saying queen takes f4 would be bad in this variation. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think anyone would think a queen takes f4 in the first place, and then this is strange. Must be from like a computer thing. Second best move in the computer or something. h4, I've seen these ideas before mastering it often enough to know that the sacrifice is actually pretty dangerous to accept. And then you give kind of what else they could have done. Bishop takes f6 is pretty common, so d5. So I didn't enter the complications. As I saw, I would win a pawn and thought I could defend. Defending was so hard that I think I may have been better off leaving the bishop there. So then you take the f4 pawn, giving back the piece. So that was nice to see there. G takes f6, bishop takes f6. Yeah, highly suggest with all your variations, especially since you give variations for both colors, to put some text here as well as evaluations at the end of them, so when looking back, like what the idea was, and which one was the proper move for you and which ones were mistakes, etc. from white or black. So kind of hard. I mean, like clearly here, yes, that's a given, but just there's a lot of branching that you do on both sides. So that would be unfortunate to step into. To e5, bishop f5, 94. Sure, no problem with this. And it's looking pretty good for black. Okay. Bishop e5, knight b5. C7, rook b8, d5, b5. That's nice. Yeah, so the queen and king are lined up, and so we're trying to do something like this. So that's what we have here. Okay, b8, c1, d5. D takes e4 is a huge threat. Looks like the queen and knight, and queen cannot capture. The queen is tied to the defense of the bishop. Queen takes e5. Knight takes e5. Queen takes e5. The threat of d takes e4 remains, so it would now attack the queen twice. Quite simply lost here. No. Yeah, it looks like a very nice shot that you found there. Yeah, and then white resigns. Yeah, so good job. This definitely seems to have been played at above a 1500 level. Like you played extremely well. I would just suggest kind of adding more actual thoughts to the lines as well as valuations and kind of organize it a bit more. Would be very helpful to yourself when you're looking back at the games. But this is a very well played game, so congratulations. And congratulations on your graduation. So now let's move on to looking at Jesse's game. It's been about 2 hours in the game now, so let's find that game. All right, so Jesse was playing as black against Kaidanov. Let's turn off the engine. All right, so we've got. All right, Kaidanov actually played e4. So Kaidanov has been playing d4 this whole tournament, and has been playing kind of like f3 systems, especially against the Nimzo. So we were seeing most of his games were going like this. Here, and so I'm sure Jesse had been preparing for that, but instead his opponent decided, you know what, I'm having a really bad tournament. Kaidanov was honestly had a really poor tournament. He in the first few rounds was getting an opening advantage quite often, and he got one against Akopian. And then he had like a completely winning position that he ended up completely blowing multiple times. And then ever since then, he's just been losing like every game. It's been really unfortunate to see, but I'm sure Jesse was trying to prepare something for that. And so kind of changing things up a bit. We get this classical French. Jesse goes for the d takes line, knight takes bishop e7. Right, so now black at least temporarily has the bishop pair. Castles, queen d2, b6. All right, so Kaidanov is still trying for fairly aggressive concept of castling queenside. Bishop b7, so Jesse has resolved the bad bishop of the French. Here at c3. Yeah, this no longer at all looks like a French. So very interesting. Jesse preserves the bishop pair. Queen c2 is played, eyeing down on the h7 square. c5 break, d takes c5, queen c7. Okay, so a pawn stack for now. And then b takes c5. So obviously with any sec, we have to understand what we do if they accept it. Yeah, if they accept, we get the open A file, and then we're bearing down on the king. So that makes sense. Just why he can't. Knight takes f3, knight takes f3, bishop trade. So now we just have a bishop against knight. Black's c pawn's a little weak. White's king is weak as well. So dynamically, yeah, Jesse's playing for dynamics here, and I mean, so is get out. This is like almost like a Sicilian type position, although this pawn would normally be gone in the Sicilian. Yeah, this is looking very interesting. Very, very interesting for sure. Um, let me. I got a message a while ago that I should have looked at. Is that? No, that didn't fix it. Okay. Someone's trying to help me fix the overlay, but um, okay, yeah. So this is where Jesse's game currently is at. Um, yeah, I'd say it's a very interesting position. White's potentially going to come in to h6. Black likewise is wanting to try to mate um, the white king. So he's got ideas of here or here, attacking here, and that also pins the pawn. So that potentially this falls if white actually does move over here. So yeah, very very dynamic position. Very Jesse's down on the clock by about 12 minutes or so, but yeah, I'd say I like black better here. I think black's attack is farther along and easier to execute. But yeah, it's definitely one where concrete lines is going to be how this is solved. Cool. What else has gone on in the senior? Draw between Golden and Novikov, who also both of them kind of had a rough-ish tournament. Golden did win against Jesse yesterday. So we had a Queen's game that declined. Queens came off very early, and then they repeated and called it a game. Neither of them anywhere near the top of the standings, so they probably weren't looking to play very much. We got Shabalov versus Benjamin Scotch. Interesting. Okay. So that's still ongoing. Um, this is an important game between first and second. We've got a French. So of course this knight cannot be taken because then we get well, first of all, just hangs. But I was thinking of you also have this in some lines, but we're good. We just have a knight here, so yeah. After going through so many games, I'm getting a little tired, so I see why commentators get tired. All right, that was what we just looked at. Where do we think this position? Probably equal. The bishop is probably slightly better, but the pawns are, yeah, I mean, that's probably equal, right? It's going to come in and attack here, so we got to do something about that. And then ownership against Rachel is also a very important game for the standings, but like Onishuk needs to be, Onishuk's in third, so needs to quote unquote be stopped or whatever. So what do we have? We had a Queen's Gambit accepted. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, then he shook up 30 minutes on the clock. Interesting. I think white looks better here. This pawn's probably going to fall. This pawn will probably fall as well, but then yeah, I don't know. Interesting. All right, well, I'm gonna end it there. It looks like Jesse played Rook FD8, and then H takes G6. Yeah, so I'll end it there. Jesse will keep playing. We'll check. Everyone should check back in and watch the game, but I need to get lunch. I'm quite hungry and quite tired. So thanks all for joining. Appreciate you stopping by, and congratulations again to all the graduates. Oh, I'm not. Can mods do raids? I don't know. I'll just end the stream because I don't know how that works. So go ahead and end stream. Thank you all. Have a good rest.